So we're calling this program Places That Matter, Burial Grounds of North Castle. I've picked a quote from Benjamin Franklin. Show me your cemeteries and I will tell you what kind of people. Much of the information comes from a booklet that Barbara Massey, George Pooter, and Judy Johnson Zelver put together. It's a compilation of previous inventories, cemetery inventories, where people actually went to the cemeteries and inventoried the information on each gravestone. God bless you. So these are the cemeteries in North Castle. Most of them are what we call abandoned, meaning there's no active burial in the cemetery. Middle Patent and St. Stephen's are still active cemeteries. So the first one we're going to talk about is the Briggs Hunt Burial Ground. It has been lost to history. There are no stones remaining. The cemetery site is on Old Mount Kisco Road near Wago Avenue, surrounded by a stone wall. It's not visible from the road. The right-of-way access comes from Old Mount Kisco Road. What we do have is a 1943 inventory list put together by town historian Richard Lander. He documented at that time 7 burials of Briggs family, 8 burials of Hunt family. They were buried between 1825, 1862. 5 of those burials were children under the age of 2. So the next is the Carpenter Cemetery. This cemetery is located at the corner of Evergreen Row and North Lane in Windmill Farm. Currently, 26 burials are documented, although we know there are many more graves there without markers. The gravestones faced west, which is sort of opposite to most of our cemeteries in town, whose graves face east for the rising sun. So members of the Carpenter, Crooker, Hammond, Jones, Lyon, McReach, Mosier, Palmer, Rundle, Stebbins, Tweedle, and Warden families rest in this cemetery. So Anna Maria is going to tell us about one.
Hi, Carpenter Cemetery. One of the carpenters buried in the cemetery was Jotham Carpenter. He died in 1852 at the age of 89 years. Jotham was married to Susanna Foreman. They were the parents of 10 children. It is thanks to the testimony of Jotham in the McDonald papers that we know Thomas Wright owned the mill at the intersection of today's High Street and Cox Avenue during the American Revolution. The earliest documented burial in the cemetery is that of Ann Crooker, who died in 1760 at the age of 33. The last documented burial was that of Aaron Hammond, age 70, who died in 1919.
So the next burial ground is actually half of 2. Both are at the corner of Cox Avenue and School Street. The Methodist Cemetery, it's an early cemetery. The Methodist Church was there at that corner until they moved down to the middle of town where the Chinese church is today. There are 39 gravestones that we've been able to document. The burials were between 1844 and 1909. This next is just over the line in Bedford, the Ferris family burial ground. I included it because the Ferris family is one of the earliest founding families in North Castle, and served in all positions of leadership in town. To get to the cemetery, you need Westmoreland Sanctuary staff approval, and they will take you there. The Ferris family, as I said, since before 1747, and 34 of the 50 known burials have been documented. The map to the right is from the book that I pointed out up front. That's the layout of the cemetery. So you can see that all that empty space was probably a burial ground. This is the Fisher burial ground. It's on North Broadway, 786 North Broadway and North White. There are 9 burials that we've been able to document between 1851 and 1881. And Civil War soldier Lieutenant Edward Fisher was killed in Virginia, but there is a monument to him in this cemetery. He was killed in the Civil War. The Foster Buckout Cemetery, again, I included because of some interesting things. Just over the line in White Plains on the watershed land. There are 53 graves that have been documented. Most of the stones in this cemetery have been stolen. It's been heavily vandalized. We do understand that some stones are in the protection of the White Plains Historical Society as well as Westchester County Historical Society. We have an inventory reporting Buckout, Cox, Carpenter, Foster, Marsh, Meeks, Platt, Stevens, and Wildey family members buried between 1821 and 1927. And there is a report that the cemetery is haunted. So this, if you can see the blue arrow pointing to what was once an Indian burial ground, it now has been lost to history. This map, 1900s map, John Platt Tripp owned a farm, and it was on his farm. We think it's possibly the same burial ground as Quinby, and we'll get to Quinby in a moment. So here's a picture of the way the Lyon family burial ground looks today. It's set back from Route 22 across from Chestnut Ridge Road north of Armonk. Reportedly, a number of Revolutionary War soldiers who died in a field hospital nearby are buried in this cemetery. We have no documentation to support that story. Members of the Lyon, Bussing, Nash, Seeley, and Sniffing families are buried, and right-of-way is across private property. So I think Linda Cantatori is going to read something about the...
I'm going to put it just over. Okay. Lyon Cemetery. Captain Roger Lyon, French and Indian War and Colonial Militia. Captain in the Westchester Militia. Captain Roger Lyon died at North Castle in 1797. He and his 7 sons were staunch patriots. He had an extensive tract of land on today's Bedford. In the early 1900s, a descendant had the bodies of Captain Roger Lyon, Major Samuel Lyon, Judge Samuel Lyon, and Rosalinda Fowler Lyon removed to Long Ridge Cemetery, Long Ridge, Connecticut. Sadly, the descendant left behind the wives of Captain Roger and Major Samuel's infant children. Tradition is that General George Washington and his staff stopped at the Lyon farm. General Washington and Captain Roger Lyon were conversing. The general was given water in a sterling candle cup, the best of the house. Elderly Captain Roger Lyon, who was almost blind, said to General Washington, "General, the ladies say you are a very handsome man, but I cannot see." General Washington replied, "Tell the ladies I'm afraid they are as blind as yourself." The cup was passed down in the Lyon family, donated to the Westchester County Historical Society, and then passed to the North Castle Historical Society, where it is permanently displayed in the tap room of historic Smith Tavern.
Thank you. So, Ree, I think you're up next.
Okay, this is also about the Lyon Cemetery. There are two more Revolutionary War patriot soldiers that rest in the Lyon Cemetery. Private John Lyon, Captain Gilbert Lyon's company, Colonel Thomas Thomas's regiment, 2nd Westchester County Militia, later served as private in Captain David Hobby's company, same regiment. John Lyon was born on King Street, town of Rye, New York, in 1753. He died November 17, 1815, in North Castle. He married Ruth Knapp, had 3 sons. He lived near his brother, Samuel Lyon, and their Major Samuel Lyon, and their father, Captain Roger Lyon, on Bedford Road. Private Andrew Sniffen, Captain David Hobby's company, Colonel Thomas Thomas's regiment, 2nd Militia, 2nd Westchester County Militia. There we go.
Unfortunately, we don't know much more about Private Andrew, so if someone has a burning desire to research, go for it. The Methodist Cemetery is one of the two that I told you is on the corner of Cox and School. I think I probably misreported the first time. It was the Cox Cemetery. Now this is the Methodist. 175 graves are documented there. The stones are heavily damaged and, you know, giving way to the wear from the weather. They do need to be reset, recarved if we're going to preserve them. This cemetery is mowed by our Parks Department, or both those cemeteries. So Linda Ranieri is going to tell us something interesting about.
We hope. Methodist Cemetery. Private Calvin Briggs, Captain David Haight's company, Stanwich 9th, Connecticut. Militia, Colonel John Meade. Caleb Briggs was born in October 1753 in Stanwich, Connecticut. He was a private in Captain David Haight's company, 9th Connecticut Militia. Colonel John Meade commanding. After the war, he resided near Armonk. He died June 1836. Colonel Meade's regiment fought in the Battle of Long Island, August 27, 1776, and was one of the last regiments to leave New York on the retreat from the city. The regiment fought in the Battle of White Plains, October 28 through November 6, 1776, where many of the men were killed.
Thank you. So the next is my very favorite, Middle Patent Rural. All of these guys that you see listed are Revolutionary War patriots. They're all buried in Middle Patent, and we continue to discover new ones. So Mr. Morris is going to tell us about Charles Rundle. Tim Radis is going to tell us about the one on the screen, Daniel Brown.
Private Daniel Brown, Jr., Captain David Hobby's company, Colonel Thomas's 2nd Regiment, Westchester County Militia. Daniel Brown was a farmer in the East Middle Patent area. He once wrote a letter to the town clerk of North Castle notifying the town of stray animals in his enclosure. The letter not only tells us that he was a farmer, but that he was educated enough to carry on correspondence, and that he was a concerned and apparently irate citizen. Daniel Brown was born in 1739. His stone stands alone on the top of a hill in the cemetery. He died September 3rd, 1827, at the age of 88 years.
Steve, you're going to be, you go ahead, Robbie. Let me go, right, we're going to go out of line just a little bit. Charles Rundle. Yep, you go right ahead.
Oh, okay. Middle Patton Rural Cemetery. Private Charles Rundle, Captain Hobby D Company, 2nd Regiment, Westchester County Militia, Colonel Thomas's Regiment. Charles Rundle was born on January 12, 1759. His house stands today on Bedford Road, just north of Banksville Road intersection on the grounds of St. Nurses Armenian Seminary. He died on November 14, 1825, at the age of almost 67. He had at least 5 children.
You're doing Southern?
Platt.
You're doing Platt.
Okay. Captain Benemy Platt, North Castle, East Company, Middle Regiment, Westchester County Militia, appointed October 19, 1775, a staunch patriot. Benany's house, much renovated and added to over the years, survives on Bedford-Banksville Road. He operated a mill on the Mianus. He formed a Middle Patton Regiment of the Westchester County Militia very early on in the Revolutionary War.
Thank you. So the next, and while Christine is coming to tell us about Captain Roger Sutherland, I just want to, this Colonel Thomas, I always like to say his parents must have had an incredible sense of humor.
So here you go. Okay. Captain Roger Sutherland served under Colonel David Sutherland, 6th Regiment, Dutchess County Militia, Charlotte Precinct, although he lived in North Castle. He was not a young man when he served in the Revolutionary War. Roger was 57 years old. He died in 1798, 17 years after the victory at Yorktown, Virginia. The engraved reminder on Roger's tombstone is still quite legible. Hark from the tombs a doleful sound, mine ears attend the cry. Ye living men, come view the ground where you must shortly lie.
Somebody else with a sense of humor, right? So the Mianus Burial Ground is a brand new one unearthed in 2005. Barbara and Lou Massey, George Pooter, and Anthony Godino found it by using ground-penetrating radar. They discovered 6 burial sites. 4 members of the Hobby, Knapp, and Smith families were documented, and access to this cemetery is through Mianus River Gorge Preserve. So here's a picture of the way the Quaker Cemetery looks. The Quaker Cemetery is just behind Smith's Tavern and closer to the houses on Roseanne Drive, facing Byram Lake Road. So there are 133 burials that are recorded. We know of 1 Revolutionary War patriot buried here, Private Joseph Waring. And this cemetery is heavily threatened by neglect, but I have, in discussions with Barbara, some hopeful news. So we will see what we can work out.
I also hope people, I would like to see a volunteer group, take perhaps
I'll repeat what Deputy Supervisor said, and she's echoing my thoughts as well. Democracy, we have to participate in a democracy. We cannot sit back and wait for government to do it. Government cannot do it all. So what we're hoping for is that this program and others like it and your conversation with neighbors will generate some interest, some volunteers, and let's put a group together, whether we call it Friends of Cemeteries or Save the Cemeteries or whatever we want to call it. Let's put a group together and get something going so that we don't lose any more.
That was set up at Windmill 20 years ago.
Yes, Windmill residents got together and started taking care of the one that's in Windmill. So this one is let me make sure I didn't leave anyone out. Yes, this is the Quinby burial ground that some of us think was an extension of the Indian burial ground. It's at the southern end of Wampus Pond off of 128. The land was deeded to the Chappaqua Friends Quakers in 1802, taken by New York City for their watershed in the 1900s. And in 1963, Westchester County bought Wampus Pond and 93 acres from the city. 15 graves are marked with initials only on field stones. And again, Dick Lander documented those in 1943. There's an oral tradition that a Quinby married a local Indian and that this is also the Indian cemetery. Cultural resources have been inventoried, and they include rock shelters, Native American artifacts, and this pond, Wampus Pond, means opossum. So the next is the Smith Burial Ground. It's located on the east side of Whippoorwill Road, just south of Meadow Hill Road. A right-of-way leads to the surrounding stone wall. The land was owned by Jacob Smith. Vietnam War veteran Kenneth Martin Bates has a memorial stone here. He was lost at sea when his jet crashed after taking off from a carrier. We believe the earliest burial was 1811, and 79 burials have been documented. And Laura is going to come tell us about a World War I hero.
Let's see. Well, my mom taught me to admit what I don't know, and I don't know how to say his last name. Usted. Yeah, so that was my guess. All right. William J. Usted, a World War I hero killed in action. A letter from somewhere in France from his commanding officer, Lieutenant Hugh S. Webb, told of his death. Mrs. Usted, your son has been in my platoon, the first of Company M, since we went into Alsace the middle of last July. So I knew him very well. He was a good man and a good soldier. He was cheerful and smiling. Your son had a rifle bullet entirely through the right chest coming out the back. I had the same kind of wound, only lower and through the right chest. He lived, I guess. Yes. Both men were in the same ambulance. Billy Usted died at 24 years of age in the ambulance on the way to the field hospital.
So I will say that Laura June has been instrumental in pulling weeds and cutting underbrush and taking care of the Smith Cemetery as much as possible. So our next is the second active cemetery, St. Stephen's. We all know where it is. We all know how beautifully the congregation keeps it. We believe that the land was used as a burial ground before the church building was constructed in 1842, because 2-year-old George Lander was buried here in 1825, 1-year-old Stephen Lander Jr. in 1830, and Stephen Lander himself in 1834. The cemetery has almost 600 burials that we've documented. So Ed is going to tell us about William Henry Creamer.
William Henry Creamer. Creamer served as town clerk for 8 years. He copied by hand and lamplight the deteriorating town minute book covering 1736 through 1848. He kept daily journals preserved today as the Creamer Diaries. He detailed farm life and community happenings. William and Phoebe Jane Green of Green Valley, today's Green Valley Road, married in 1856. He was a blacksmith near Smith Tavern in his early years. He ran an express delivery business in New York and Brooklyn, but in 1861 he returned to the Green Valley farm full-time. He became one of the town's leading citizens, vestryman, clerk, and warden of St. Stephen's Church. He was clerk of School District Number 4, a member of the cooperative North Castle Creamery Company, and he belonged to mechanics and Masonic lodges. Mechanics Hall is still standing here in town. It's now where, what's the? Cocobola, thank you. That's where Cocobola is, yeah. Dick Lander, a previous town historian, reported that Creamer was an excellent stone carver. The stone well curb at the corner of his house, which stands today at the corner of Green Valley and Creamer Roads, bears carvings of the Masonic emblem, the Episcopalian cross, and the initials WHC.
Thank you. Getting near the end for those of you restless. Townsend Burial Ground. This cemetery is at the far corner of an estate on Orchard Drive. This is the piece of property that has been sold recently, and I presume the new owner will be asking for subdivision of the property. Israel Townsend Jr. was an early supervisor for North Castle. He's buried in this family cemetery. We know of only 12 graves. Howes, Merritt, Sands, and Townsend family members are buried here. So Israel, the town supervisor, was born in 1791, the son of another Israel. His home, greatly remodeled over the years, survives today at 495 Main Street. Israel and his wife Phoebe Sands of the Sands family, who owns Sands Mills, along with his parents and other family members, rest in this family cemetery high atop the hill off of Orchard Drive. Israel was a founding member of St. Stephen's. At various times he served as town justice of the peace, road commissioner, overseer of the poor, and elections inspector. In 1853 he became postmaster for Armonk, and the name of the post office was changed from Sands Mills to Armonk. This next one I'm indebted to Laura June for pointing out to me. I did not know where the Tucker family lived, nor the cemetery was located. This snippet from the 1881 Bromley map shows where the Tuckers lived. I can't make it bigger, but it's south of Armonk. Now, I wonder if I may have copied in the wrong map.
It's a higher. It's a higher. It's a left. There you are, right there. Down a little bit.
Left.
Down.
Well, I'm glad y'all found him. W. Tucker and A. Tucker. Well, happily we didn't lose them again. So they appear on the 1880 census. We really don't know what happened to them, where they went, but some were buried in the cemetery. We do not know if anything survives there. We think it is lost to history.
I think it's there.
You think it's there? Well, we'll go.
We're going to go.
We're going to go. So these are the cemeteries and resting places of people who assumed religious, political, agricultural, and business leadership in our town. Protecting and preserving their grave sites matters. These people lived, worked, married, parented, and built our community. They went to war to establish our country. They went to war to defend our country. We are the link between ancestors and descendants. We are the caretakers for those who come after us. We are tasked with saving the places that matter. And I'll close with, show me your cemeteries, and I will tell you what kind of people you have. Thank you.